Hi, this is Eric from the Longbox Review comic book podcast at longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for listening and thanks for joining me. This episode, I'm going to do something that I have been wanting to do for a very long time. In fact, when I first started longboxreview.com, well before it was at that address, but I had a Blogspot account, and I had the blog there first, and then I moved to WordPress. But back in 2009, when I started Longbox Review, I had the intent of not only talking about the comics that I was reading currently at that time, but I also wanted to dip into, guess what, the long boxes in my office and review comics that I loved that were in my collection. And I did that a little bit on the blog, but not as much as I wanted to, because I got swept up into looking at the new stuff more so. And I haven't really done a whole lot of what I kind of used to call retro reviews here on the show. I've dipped into it a little bit, but not with the intent that I had originally. So I'm going to correct that. I'm going to look at one of my favorite issues in my collection and just talk through it. Just doing the one, still trying out this new format, and where I'm hopefully not talking too long and I can get more episodes out. So this episode, I will be looking at The Brave and the Bold, number 182. The Interlude on Earth 2, it says. So this has a cover date of January 1982. It was released, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics website, in October 1981, which means I got it somewhere between, sometime after October 1981 and early 82, I'm guessing. But I remember buying this off the shelf at a supermarket. No spinner rack there, but there was it was in the magazine section. So all these comics were up on these stands where all the magazines were. I don't know if that's even a thing these days in stores, but that's where I got a lot of my comics early on. Not to mention the spinner racks in convenience stores that were just basically popping up when I was reading comics early on. So, but anyway, came out in 81. This is by Alan Brennert, Jim Aparo, of the great Jim Aparo, and Carl Gafford. This is a 19-page story, which I guess I hadn't realized that we had 19-page stories in comics I was reading at any point. Considering, I thought it was an interesting point because we have these 20-page stories. More or less, that's the norm now for DC and Marvel comics. Well, DC at least. I don't know what Marvel comics are, how many pages they're giving us for $4. But 19 pages to tell this interesting story, and it makes me wonder what they could have done with this story had they had more pages to develop it with. And it's 19 pages because back in 1981, 82, some of the comics, some of DC's comics had these backup features. And this one is no exception. This featured a story with the character Nemesis. It's an 8-page story. So I'm not going to talk about that, but I will mention that it is drawn by Dan Spiegel, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, I'm going to talk about the Brave and the Bold number 182, starring Batman and Robin the X, EX in all caps, X Boy Wonder, which is to say that this is the Robin of Earth 2. The Robin of Earth 2 with his really cool red and yellow and green costume that he has on the cover here. So on the cover it's kind of a weird cover because you've got Batman front and center ish on the cover, and Robin is there, of course, to his left, and also you find out you find out here on the cover, but she doesn't appear until about midway through the story. that the Batwoman of Earth 2 is also part of this story. You've got the floating head of the villain of the story, the antagonist, Dr. Strange, Dr. Hugo Strange, the original Dr. Strange, and with an old style Batmobile racing towards them from the bottom right. And then you got the title on there. I just thought it was interesting because the way that Batman is posed here, I think Jim Aparo did this as a means to be able to put in all these elements on the cover. Otherwise, I don't know how they would put everything on here. But Robin is not even fully on the cover. Part of his hand and his cape is cut off from the cover. Batwoman is essentially, you see her head, part of her torso, and a leg and a hand, because she's behind the two men in the on the cover. But then Batman's so the Batmobile is racing towards them, and they're all looking over their shoulder. The two characters, Robin and Batwoman are doing that, but Batman's he's sort of looking under his armpit. So his arms are stretched out away from his body. And the way his head is looking, it's his one of his eyes is kind of cocked towards the back, but his cape is in the way. So there's no way, and he can't see under his armpit behind him in the way that his body's presenting, because his body's kind of weirdly twisted. And I don't know why I'm focusing on that. I just think it's really interesting. But and like I said, anyway, there's an old style Batmobile there with the hood ornament, which is huge, is a stylized Batman head, but it's got the pointy ears, of course, but the chin part of it is protruding out, and it's like I think it's supposed to be like a razor of some sort, which would cut through things. And I remember seeing this old style Batmobile in other stories that I'd read around that time too. Anyway, so we get into this story. Page 1, first thing I'm struck with, well, first of all, visually, is that you see Dick Grayson taking off an overcoat, and he already has his Robin costume on, but not the mask. And he puts that on. He's with Starman, Ted Knight. And Starman is saying that there's this, what you find out by reading the caption boxes and all of the dialogue, there's a lot of words on this page, a lot of words, which was kind of a convention back then. The comics tended to be a little wordy compared to today in some cases, which kind of got in the way of looking at some of this art. Which, you get small panels with small basically small characters in the panel, and you get a real sense of confinement in here, which is actually a good thing for this particular story. But they didn't always do that on purpose. It was just, there was a lot of words on the page, and they had to account for those. But you find out that there's this a fierce, unrelenting electrical storm buffeting Gotham City, and Ted Knight's saying this is not natural, and so they're going away to investigate, and Robin suspects who this might be. And like I said, Robin is in his really cool red, yellow, and green costume, which I love. This was designed by Neil Adams. It first appeared, I think, in Justice League of America number 92, but it was worn by the Earth 1 Robin. There's a story where they were fighting, the JLA and the JSA teamed up. They were fighting an alien, Earth 1 Robin. I always think of him as my Robin. Earth 1 Robin, his costume got shredded up a little bit. So the Earth 2 Robin, who was then wearing a more Batman-like costume, said that when he was considering changing his costume before he decided on what I think is probably one of the ugliest costumes ever designed, even though I love Robin, he was considering this other red, yellow, and green one, where it was designed by the fashion designer Neil Adams. They actually name-checked Neil Adams within the issue. So Neil Adams exists on Earth 2. I always thought that was kind of cool. Although back then I had no idea. I mean, I actually only read that Justice League of America issue 92 within the last year or two. So I didn't even realize that Earth 1 Robin wore that costume, a version of this costume first. And then the Earth 2 Robin, I believe, wore it next in, I want to say All-Star Comics number 58. I could be wrong about that, but that was a reprint of that issue that I read in a DC Special Blue Ribbon Digest number 3. That's where I first encountered Earth 2 Robin wearing that costume. And so then, and I read that issue, that digest first, I believe, and then I saw this Brave and the Bold issue on the stands. And so I'm like, well, I got to get this. Cause I had basically in the early 80s, well, let's see. I don't know when that digest came out. I want to say, I don't know. I have no idea when it came out. I forgot to write it down. Shoot. But that was my introduction to the multiverse concept in DC Comics. And I just love that idea. Like all these different characters running around, a different Superman, a different Batman, a different Robin. I mean, depending on what story they were in, would dictate how different they actually were. But just the idea of these other characters and plus the team ups that they could do, I just thought was really cool. And so anything that had to do with the Earth 1 characters teaming up with the Earth 2 characters, I tried to buy as many of those as I could. And this was one of them. And so, like I said, Ted Knight, Starman, and Robin go off to investigate. And then Ted is basically taken out of the story by page 2, the top of page 2, because his hand holding the star rod is struck by the lightning that they are going off to investigate the source of, which I'll come back to this in a later scene. But I don't know, if you're flying, then you're not grounded, right? So maybe that is less of an issue, but obviously, Ted or Starman is incapacitated. So probably not a good thing to go flying off into, where the lightning is flashing around, right? Anyway, we find out very early on in this story, if you didn't, pay attention to the cover, that it is indeed Dr. Hugo Strange who is out to enact revenge. So we see a hologram of his face, again, the floating head in space, and he says something about how because of you and your late partner, I lay crippled for nearly 20 years. I was going to own this city and be its lord and master. Now I have simpler ambitions. With the power of this cosmic rod in my hands, within 24 hours, Gotham City will be a blistering ruin, and I shall have you to thank for it. So right off the bat, Robin, and like I said, Robin is I think I said this, Robin is one of my favorite characters in comics. And I always hate it when Robin is shown to be incompetent. I know he's supposed to be, the junior partner of Batman, so to speak. But so Hugo Strange, I guess his plot was to cause this lightning storm to bring Robin to him and the cosmic rod, I guess. I'm not sure how that all worked out, but anyway, it did. But, and so, thus setting up the Earth 2 part of this story. And before I go to the Earth 1 part of the story, because this is, after all, a Batman comic, and Batman hasn't appeared in the first 2 pages, although he's been mentioned. And I just want to mention there's one panel here where as Strange is talking to, gloating to Robin, a flash of lightning strikes down where Robin was, and Robin quickly moves out of the way. And my first thought was, Robin dodges lightning? He's that fast? And I mean, that always happens in comics whenever lightning is involved. I've noticed over the years, doesn't seem to be as fast as light. but the heroes are faster than that, right? Anyway, it's a super heroic convention. I'm fine with it. I always think it's funny. Like I said, now we get to Batman on Earth 1. He is in a graveyard, a cemetery, and he says he felt this odd compulsion to stop at the cemetery, and when no one he knows is even buried there. And then a lightning strikes nearby him. He falls backwards, and then when he gets up, he sees the tombstone that says, "Rest in peace, Bruce Wayne," to which Batman exclaims, "My God!" And then we get these wonderful caption boxes explaining the multiverse concept. And I'm sure that the writers and editors of DC Comics did this all the time whenever they had stories. I mean, every story, I'm sure they did this, where they just in case, because every comic could be someone's first comic, right? And so they have to explain what the multiverse is. And so they say this: Twin Earths. On one, the age of costume heroes dawned in the 1940s with the legendary Justice Society of America. On the other, that age came decades later with the heroes of the Justice League. So it just, within just a few words, they explain the multiverse. And as a kid, I read this, I'm like, yeah, okay. I just accepted it. And I always find it funny when people, I don't know, objected to the multiverse as too complicated and all this stuff, and you just can't get into the whole idea. And there was a dark period in DC Comics after the Crisis where the multiverse was ignored or forgotten or just forbidden to be in existence. I mean, that slowly changed over time, of course, and then they officially brought back the multiverse in, what was it? Was it the weekly series 52? I think it was. And I was just jubilant. I was ecstatic that they finally brought the multiverse back, and now it's, just part of DC Comics. They don't really play around with it too much, unfortunately, but that's fine. It's there to be used, which it should be. Anyway, moving on. And so, moving on to the story, Batman is flying through. He realizes quickly, of course, that he's on Earth 2, and he's again they're flying. He's flying through Gotham City, and the lightning's flashing all around him. With he says, "Odd, I thought ball lightning occurred only rarely in nature, not like this." And so that was, again, this is one of the things I love about comic books. I learned so much about my world, science fiction concepts and whatnot by reading comics. And ball lightning was something that I never heard of before until I read this. And then, of course, I probably went to school the next day and found an encyclopedia, because, the internet did not exist back then. So you can't look those things up nowadays, or like you can nowadays. And I looked up ball lightning. I'm like, there it is. That actually is a phenomenon. So it's just like, I just really love that about comics, how much it's not just entertainment. It's actually an education. Anyway, somebody is trying to mug some people. It seems like Batman is always interfering with that. And when he helps them out, this couple who's walking around the mean streets of Gotham City in this lightning storm, they are freaked out by the appearance of Batman, because in this timeline, this period of time, I should say, the Batman of Earth 2 is dead. And apparently seeing another Batman is like seeing a ghost or something. They say, "Stay away from us. Whatever you are, stay away." And Batman says, "I don't think I like this. Better find Justice Society headquarters. Maybe Dr. Fate can send me back to Earth 1, because I certainly don't belong here." On the next page, Robin is racing back to JSA headquarters, and he sees someone at the door and attacks him, and realizes that it's Bruce Wayne. He says, "Hold it right there, whoever you are." Bruce? No, that emblem. You're the Batman of Earth 1. And Batman says, yes. And despite the new costume, I take it you're Robin? We met briefly a few years ago. And so, like I said, the costume, like I said, it first appeared in, I think, JLA number 92. And then in a few years later in All-Star Comics 58. But the main thing here is, I mean, there actually is a yeah. Batman says we met briefly a few years ago, and there's an editor's note here. These events obviously take place before those depicted in World's Finest Comics number 271. And I read through that to see how that might impact the story, and I didn't really see how it did. I was confused by it, but maybe that's just because I didn't read it carefully. But interesting that they reference World's Finest 271 and not, well, it's probably that was a more recent comic than some of these others. So that probably makes a lot of sense. Although there's another issue, I'll get to that in a second, where I don't know when World's Finest 271 came out, but another comic came out just literally a few months earlier in publication time, but I'll get to that. Anyway, Robin in this scene is really taken aback at first at seeing I did it again, the Earth One Batman. It's almost like the way he's reacting to me is almost like that his Batman had just died. But it had happened in publishing time. It had happened 3 years earlier in Adventure Comics. I think number 462. And so if that's what they're playing with, that's fine. That maybe here in this continuity, in this issue, Earth 2 Batman had just died. That would totally make sense. Or what they're playing with here is that Batman's death just really has impacted Dick Grayson so much so that he reacts the way he does throughout the rest of the story. And I'm not sure which one it is. But what's funny is that, like I said, the issue of JLA number 195, which had just been published like just a few months earlier than this Brave and the Bold issue, they had seen each other. And Huntress even says something about how Batman and Robin had time to talk. And so that made me think, were they referencing this Brave and the Bold issue that was published after that appearance? Or was it something else? Maybe it's the 271 issue, but from what I remember of reading that issue 271 of World's Finest, they didn't interact or barely interacted. So I'm not sure what conversation Huntress was referring to. But if it was this Brave and the Bold issue, that would totally make sense. It's just the timeline, the publishing timeline doesn't work. So, but in my head canon, I'll just think of it that way, that Brave and the Bold happened and then the JLA thing happened. And because of timey-wimey multiversal stuff, it's okay. Not to mention, going back to the why Robin is reacting the way he does, and also just that the continuity issue that I just described. Good storytellers don't let continuity get in the way of a good story, and regardless of what is going on or what had gone on in previous appearances of Robin and Batman, it doesn't matter, because what's gold to mine here is this relationship, is this interesting dynamic, pardon the pun, I didn't realize, between this duo of characters. So anyway, Robin fills Batman in on what's going on. We get a flashback explaining what happened to Hugo Strange in some earlier issue of Batman. I don't know what it is because they don't reference it, but we get a summary, so that's fine. They think that Batman or Hugo Strange has died, like he said, the character said earlier in the issue. Robin says, "I know this isn't your fight, but can you help me out?" Basically, and Batman says, "I'll do anything I can, and please call me Bruce." Robin turns away and says, "I'd rather not if you don't mind. No offense, but there'll always be only one Bruce Wayne for me." It's basically, "Hey, dude, I like your help, but I don't really want to be around you. I don't really want to be your buddy." So, like I said, it's a weird and interesting relationship that they're starting to explore here. Anyway, there's some gunfire which draws them outside, and it is an old Panther jet from that Selena Kyle, Catwoman, had used in the past, and it's shooting people down on the street. I'm sure no one died, of course. Back then, people didn't die from things like that. But our heroes barely dodge. Batman takes charge by telling Robin to move. He basically tells Robin, "You help the people, I'll take the plane." Robin objects, and he's like, and Batman gives him a command. Because that's what Batman's used to doing to Robin. Of course, we find out a little bit later, Robin doesn't take very well to that. However, there's a point here where, so Batman does take care of the plane, causing it to crash land, and no one else gets hurt. But in jumping out of the plane, before that happens, Batman, because he's thinking to himself this whole time, and thought bubbles kids, they were around a lot back in comics back then, and your characters, either if they weren't talking, they were thinking to themselves. And so he seems distracted, but as he's falling through the air, he misses a flagpole to stop himself. But fortunately, Robin is there to help him out and chides him by saying, "Now then, while I have your attention, you're not on Earth 1 anymore, Batman, and I'm not your junior partner, but a grown man, about your age, I'd say." And Batman concedes that point. Point taken. Well taken, Robin. My apologies. From now on, let's work together. And and then there's this spinning top that appears, and basically Batman says, "Move it or lose it," and shoves Robin out of the way. So poor Robin can't get a break. But I thought that was, back to the Robin catching Batman, I just thought that was a nice moment to show Batman is not infallible. And that happened quite a lot, actually, before, I want to say, the 90s rolled around and Batman became the Bat God that he sometimes is nowadays, not always. I think Batman writers these days are making him a little more human, which is good. But he was more like that back in the 80s than he was in the 90s and going forward. So I always appreciate the showing Batman in that way whenever I encounter it in old comics. Anyway, the spinning top is they have to deal with that, but they end up not dealing with it because Batwoman does. So here we are, page 9, and Batwoman shows up. And then she has a similar reaction to Dick Grayson when he first saw Batman show up here, because, to her old lover is dead, and here he is in the flesh, and younger for that matter too. And Batman also has a reaction too, because here it says, and I had no idea about this. I don't know the history here. But Batman himself references, thinking to himself, "Kathy, oh Lord, Kathy, on my world, you died last year." It's like touching a ghost, not to put too fine a point on it, and how the Earth 2 characters are reacting to Batman. And now he has a similar reaction. And I just like how they keep bringing that back in different ways and for the different characters and highlighting that aspect. Maybe a little too much. We didn't need like touching a ghost, because we already know that, but that's fine. They could put that fine point on it if they want. And then Hugo Strange shows up again, goading them. And then the Batmobile that was on the cover shows up. And there is Robin says, Batman, watch out for the nose. It's razor sharp steel. So that's where I got that idea that it was a razor sharp thing. Why Batman would drive around with a razor sharp hood ornament like that, I don't know. I'd really kind of like to find out what that Golden Age Batman did with that thing. But anyway, so Batman gambles that this Batmobile has, he makes a reference to how this Batmobile is similar to a model that he had, and he's hoping the similarities don't end there, and he jumps on the back and opens up the trunk and pulls out these boxes and then tells Robin, you know its weaknesses, disable it. But Robin goes, no, there must be another. Batman interrupts, you know there isn't, hurry. And then the caption box does this weird thing. Dick Grayson knows that this thing can be nothing more than a clever copy of the original. And then he takes it out by using a batarang. It says, and he watches as the car he will always associate with the best years of his life meets an undeserving end on an anonymous street corner. And you can see in the background the Batmobile blowing up. After having just slid into a car that's parked in the street. I'm not quite sure why it exploded, but, it's comics. But, so like I said, the caption box said it was a clever copy, or Robin thinks it's a clever copy. But they find out a couple pages later that it's really not a copy, because Robin had etched his initials and the date of November 29th, 1955. And I don't know what year it is here on Earth 2. But, 55, I thought that was kind of interesting. So if Robin was young, let's say, 10, 12, and 55, and let's just assume that this is 1980-ish. Robin should be a lot older than he's depicted here, and definitely older than the Earth 1 Batman. But anyway, again, it's comics. But then it could be that the adventures of the Earth 2 superheroes are really earlier in the timeline. So I don't know. I don't know what time these comics are set. I just assume, unless we're told differently, that they are the time about the publication time. Anyway, so what Batman pulled out were these whirly bats, which I always loved the whirly bats. I'd seen them before in some other stories. But, they're just mini helicopters, one-person helicopters. And so Batman even has a slight smile on his face as he's pulling the parts out, and kind of bragging about how he gambled that his counterpart also kept emergency transportation in the trunk of the Batmobile. And so as Batman's putting together these whirly bats, Robin and Batwoman have a conversation. Basically, Robin's like, hey, we appreciate your help, but you're a married woman now, and you really don't need to be doing this. And Batwoman's like, dude, I am here. I'm helping. And she even talks about how I loved him, Robin, and then one day something changed. He became cooler, more distant. I knew what had happened. And that other identity of his, whatever it was, he got married. And after that, I swore I'd never become Batwoman again. But now he's gone, and I hate myself for all the years I avoided him, even after I'd gotten married myself. Maybe this way I can make it up to him to help save the city he loved, as well as my own family. And there's this wonderful panel of, as Batwoman is talking to Robin nearby, Batman is kind of uncomfortably listening to this conversation, which I thought was wonderful. Like I said, they find out that the Batmobile actually isn't a copy. So when I first read that, the reason I point out the caption box saying that is because it's, I read caption boxes as the authorial omniscient omnipresence. And so how could the God, quote unquote, of the story say it's a copy when within the story it's not? But the writer put an out in this, in that it's Dick Grayson who thinks it's a clever copy. So, which at first I didn't quite grasp when I read the story. But anyway, so they go off. so apparently now the lightning storm is over because there's no lightning shown in the background. I guess Hugo Strange has decided to stop that aspect of taking down Gotham City. And we find out really why in just a few pages here. But while they're flying to the Batcave in these whirly bats, they're all thinking about things. And we get the idea of how uncomfortable these characters are with each other. Robin says, I ought to be grateful he's here, but I resent his wearing that costume somehow. I resent that voice, that face, that bearing. There was only one Batman blasted, and he's gone. Batman himself is thinking he knows Robin resents him, and Kathy is spooked by him, and he's unnerved himself. We're not exactly a well-knit team, so Batman's a little more objective about it. And of course, Kathy, Batwoman, he looks like him, sounds like him, except he's so young and I'm so old. If we survive this, Batman, quote unquote, Batman, please go back to your world before I fall in love again with someone I could never have. So, a couple things here. One, do the female characters, are they always failing the Bechdel test in comics? And the answer is yes, unfortunately. And poor Robin. Like I said, I hate it when Robin is shown as incompetent and unable to move past, I don't know. Just move past certain things like this, like the death of his partner, his mentor. And to the point where, he resents this other Batman, but we've never seen that before. So I'm violating my thought about the continuity thing for a moment. We've not seen that before, but that's just because the writers, the story didn't call for that. But Alan Brennert here and Jim Aparo are taking advantage of that opening, this untapped source of character interaction and tension and conflict. So, which I appreciate that as a reader and as a storyteller myself. So, but I also, being a fan of the character Robin, I also don't like it. Anyway, so they get to the Batcave, and the Tyrannosaurus Rex robot comes to life, and they have to take care of that. And they actually do work as a team here. And they take down the robot, but then the Earth 2 Batman shows up, and Batwoman and Robin are again paralyzed because they can't get past the fact that this is, or they can't see through this illusion because this is a Batman robot, which Batman of course knows. He does say, Dick and Kathy, they have a psychological block. That thing could kill them and they wouldn't lift a finger, which, come on. I know Batman's the hero of the story and all, but geez, do they really have to relegate my Robin and Batwoman to that level of being unable to act? I just, this is where the plot of the story overtakes the characterizations we've seen already, in which I don't like that. Anyway, Robin does end up overcoming that because Batman's in danger from the robot, and so Robin takes out the robot by picking up a chunk of rock, and he says, the final job has to be mine. Forgive me, Bruce. And he slams the rock down. We don't see that, of course, but he slams the rock down on the robot to stop it. And it's just interesting, again, the forgive me, Bruce thing. It's just a robot. It's not Bruce Wayne. That's not Batman. I don't like how he's so hung up on this idea just by this visual reminder. Come on, Robin, grow the hell up. And then we get the reveal of Dr. Hugo Strange. He's not as he appeared in the holograms before. He's an old, withered, shattered man. And he says, the fall shattered my body. I lay on the rocks for days, battered beyond recognition until I was found and taken to a public sanitarium. And so he lay there. A doctor perform surgery on him to help sort of heal his body. Let's see. He found a corrupt doctor to use his own surgical notes to operate on me. He injected me with the pituitary enzyme I created years ago, altered so that my mind and body would not be distorted. But the guy botched the job. And so in his hatred and his bitterness, he decides he's going to take out Gotham City. But Batman doesn't buy it. He's like, no, Hugo, if you wanted to destroy Gotham, you would have done it long ago. What you really long for is death, isn't it? And at this point, Batman's struggling with Strange, which is odd because he's an old misshapen dude, even though he does have the Star Rod. And Strange is like, no, I'll kill you. Batman says, you can't kill us. You brought us here hoping we could do the job you didn't have the guts for. Admit it. Strange says, no, I don't. I do. And then through the power of the Star Rod, Strange disintegrates himself. And the caption reads, they were his bitterest enemies, and in the end, the only ones he knew he could count on. Sometimes, the closest thing you can have to a friend is an enemy who knows you well. To which I respond, why is Batman helping this guy commit suicide? It seems like an odd thing, but yeah. And also odd, I realize that, this is the Batman of Earth 1, but he's essentially like the Batman of Earth 2, so I guess the caption box is correct. They are enemies, but they're not each other's enemies, right? So it's a weird thing, this Earth 2, Earth 1 business. Anyway, the story ends with everyone basically feeling better about the situation between each other. Batwoman says, I just wanted to thank you, Batman, for making me remember not just the bad times, but the good. Batman turns around and kisses Batwoman on the cheek and says, I knew someone very much like you once, Kathy. I'm ashamed to say I'd almost forgotten how much I cared for her. Thank you for making me remember. Robin says, he was like the father that had been taken from me twice. I was mourning for a man you could never be. Maybe next time we could start fresh? After all, we do make a pretty good team, don't we, Bruce? Yes, we do, Dick. And so then Starman sends Batman back to Earth 1. And then Starman is talking to Dick Grayson here. Just one thing, Dick. I can see how Strange's storm could have caused a rift between worlds, but what the devil brought Batman to an empty cemetery on his Earth? Robin responds, I don't know, Ted. And frankly, I'm not sure I want to. And then the final panel shows the tombstone, Bruce Wayne's tombstone here, and the shadow is somehow that's being cast from that is somehow more of a Batman-like figure than a cross on top of a stone. I always liked it when artists take those liberties like that, especially with Batman. Although here the tombstone appears to be much smaller than the one that we saw at the very beginning of the comic. I just noticed that. But anyway, there you go. 19 pages of Batman and teaming up with Robin of Earth 2, one of my favorite issues in my collection. I thought, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about. So this issue not only is a favorite of mine just because of the comic itself, but there's a story behind this that I wanted to tell everybody. So back in March 1982, March 10th, in fact, 1982. So at the point that this episode will be released, that's after that. If I would have been smart, I would have recorded this and released it right before this anniversary, but c'est la vie. But back in 1982, there was a planetary convergence. 9 of the planets in the solar system were all essentially going to be lined up. And there was this I won't say panic or hysteria, but there was some concern that even me at my young age in 1982, I knew about this. And even though I didn't believe anything would happen during this planetary convergence, I still decided, for whatever reason, I brought like, I think 3 of my favorite comics at that time with me to school in case something happened. I don't know. What would I do with these comics if suddenly the world ended? I don't know. But this Batman and Robin issue, Brave and the Bold 182, was one of those comics. So, I don't remember what the other 2 were now. I really don't. I need to go through my comics that came out about that same time and see if those ring a bell. But this was one of them. If you're interested, there was, like I said, I mentioned the reaction to this news that was going on. And it was because of this, there was a book called The Jupiter Effect that came out in 1974. And so, there was a lot of catastrophic destruction predicted when this planetary convergence would happen. I'll put a link in the show notes for an article that talks about this. So if you're interested in knowing more about it, but obviously nothing happened. But I have a very vivid memory of sitting in my middle school math class, and I had some free time, and so I pulled the folder out that I had these 3 comics in, including this issue of Brave and the Bold. And I didn't pull the comics out to read them, but I was just kind of looking at them. And then the person sitting in front of me turned around. It was some girl. I don't remember her name now. And she was like, "Why do you have those?" And I immediately, I was pretty shy back then. and anybody talking to me was a big deal, let alone a girl. And I immediately shut the folder. I'm like, I don't remember what I said, actually. I'm sure I mumbled something under my breath, not knowing how to respond. Anyway, that's a stupid story, but just interesting, the things that I associate with the comics that I bought back then, and how those things still stick with me to this day, nearly 40 years later. So there you go. That is my take on Brave and the Bold number 182. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you like these kind of retro reviews, these examinations of these old comics. I do plan on doing more of these, along with newer stuff as well, of course. All the usual topics that I talk about on the show, but I want to start doing more of this, dipping into the archives, so to speak, and talking about some of my favorite comic books. So let me know how you like it. If you have any questions or comments about this particular issue, what you were doing if you were old enough during that planetary convergence, perhaps, or just general comments. You may send me those by emailing me at longboxreview@gmail.com, or you can leave comments at the website longboxreview.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye.